Visit any part of downtown or Santa Barbara neighborhood, and you will most likely fail to see what has sprung up over the past 50 years. Seamlessly scattered among our homes and businesses are over 4,100 units of affordable housing. That's 10% of Santa Barbara's entire housing stock.
That's what makes us unique, are our partnerships here locally with our local funders, our local service providers, in ensuring that we have developments that work for the residents and the community as a whole.
This quiet integration of affordable housing for downtown workers, seniors, families, and the homeless has made Santa Barbara livable for tens of thousands of low-income residents in the past half-century.
But whether we're talking about veterans or whether we're talking about just low-income workers or people working 2 and 3 jobs, or whether they live in the downtown core or whether they were formerly homeless, it all goes back to that real belief that housing is a basic human right.
And with that mission in mind, the Housing Authority has leaned into the challenge of building quality affordable housing dispersed throughout the city, as opposed to ghettoizing housing in large isolated blocks like in many urban areas of the U.S.
The neighbors in the community are proud of the developments that we've provided, and that's helped us build the community and political will to continue to build the affordable housing that's needed in Santa Barbara.
The vision here has always been to integrate it with neighborhoods, to make it appropriate to neighborhoods. And of course, the great test of that is if someone can walk down a street or drive down a street or ride down a street and not tell the difference between what is affordable housing and what isn't. And I think that's what we've achieved.
In 1969, Santa Barbara voters passed Measure C, allowing the city to develop low-income housing. By 1973, the first 28 townhouses were constructed on the 500 block of West Montecito Street. 50 years later, another first. 16 apartments called Johnson Court is the Housing Authority's first development for homeless veterans. Attendees honored Vietnam veteran and homeless advocate, the late Ken Williams. Vietnam vet Jimmy Cerda will be one of its first tenants.
I'm very gratified because I've been technically not homeless in about 7 years. I've rented rooms in various places. Just to have a room of my own and to place, not have to worry about my possessions.
The family of World War II veteran Vernon Johnson and his wife Ann sold the property to the Housing Authority at less than market value because their late father saw the overwhelming need for veteran housing.
He would be overjoyed. He wanted to bring railroad cars onto the property for homeless people to live in his last years. So if he saw this, he would be very happy.
And just like most other Housing Authority properties, Johnson Court will have on-site support services. One of those agencies, New Beginnings Foundation, serves hundreds of local vets each year.
They need transitional support in getting back in. They might need help with figuring out their new budget, or maybe they're, now that they have more stability, they're able to look for employment. Look for volunteer work, go back to school.
So-called wraparound services are just part of what makes Santa Barbara's Housing Authority recognized around the country.
You have mental health, you have addiction services, you have job training, you have a lot of different things and meant to cater to the needs of the folks that are here.
In a half-block area of West Carrillo Street, Geoff Green showed off 2 Housing Authority developments with different clientele. El Carrillo, built in 2006, has 61 units for homeless and disabled homeless, like 4-year resident John Tindell.
I was living in a shelter for over a year. It was getting really rough, and luckily I was accepted here. And they work with you on your rent, and it's a wonderful, great place. I love it. It's small, but it's clean, it's neat.
Virtually next door, Casa de las Fuentes, built in 2003, is 42 units of downtown Santa Barbara workforce housing.
An example of how you can build denser projects in downtown Santa Barbara and still have them be beautiful and accessible to all the core infrastructure, the jobs, and everything those residents need.
Residents like Leah Ortega. She and her boyfriend split the $1,130 monthly rent. The lower rent is allowing her to work part-time downtown and simultaneously work on her degree at UCSB, so that someday she can rent or buy market-rate housing.
So it's allowed me to better myself in my education, and then now, once I graduate in June, I'll be able to find a better job and then move on.
Considered the crown jewel of senior housing in Santa Barbara is Garden Court on De La Vina Street. 98 units built in 2000 provide a host of services, including 3 meals a day, social services, and paid utilities.
I know of no other affordable senior housing development across the country that's like Garden Court here, that provides everything that's needed at an affordable price.
Fredericks says occasionally tourists accidentally pull in here thinking it's a bed and breakfast. 12-year resident Elizabeth Wright has a room to herself and a balcony garden.
No, Garden Court's been good to me. I'm 91 and a half. I was desperate to find a place because I've always taken care of people, and wealthy people in their homes. But I've never had a home of my own.
Typically, there is a 400-person waiting list to get into Garden Court. So 11-year resident Vera Pommier feels fortunate that she was able to transition directly from her daughter's care to here.
I like this place because everybody looks out for each other.
The most popular housing authority program and what's in store for the next 50 years when we come back.
Santa Barbara is a city of bicyclists. As riders, we need to keep our bikes and our streets safe. By parking your bike correctly on the hitching posts around Santa Barbara, you can keep your bike safe and help others keep theirs safe as well. When locking your bike to these hitching posts, it's important to park them properly. Park your bike next to one of the rings on the side of the hitching post. This will prevent blockage of the sidewalk, and you will also be able to share a spot with a fellow cyclist. To lock your bike, loop your lock through your front wheel and the frame of your bike, and pass the lock through the small ring on the hitching post. For additional security, we also recommend that you use a cable to secure your rear wheel. This additional step will ensure that your bike is safe and rideable when you return. When you lock your bike right, you'll help keep Santa Barbara a great place to ride. When bicycling is easier for everybody, it helps reduce traffic and congestion on the streets. So make sure you're in the loop and bike safely, Santa Barbara.
Thanks, guys. Darn.
Well, that was very thoughtful of you.
Well, you know me, Dad. Plants don't need as much water in the fall and winter, so I decided to get up early and turn it down.
So is that what you're wearing to Grandma's?
Take control of your controller. Turn it down.
Welcome back. With over 4,000 units serving tens of thousands of renters over the past half-decade, we get a better idea of how the Housing Authority does all this financially and what's on its plate for the next 50 years. The lion's share of Housing Authority units, over 2,700, are not developments or acquisitions, but residential homes and apartments rented to residents with Section 8 housing vouchers. Carlos Adami owns 9 complexes around town housing seniors, adults with disabilities, and working families. Residents pay 30% of their income on rent. The Housing Authority subsidizes the rest.
So for the landlords, it helps us because they deposit the money on the first automatically, and there's part on the tenant side is very minimum, so it's easy for them to afford it.
Under the program, a renter's average stay is 7 years, and the Housing Authority takes care of any needs or problems the landlords may have.
The main thing to me is you can call them and they can come and help right away. As of today, I have no problems. Every time I have even a small issue, they respond within 24 hours.
Fredericks wants to dispel the myth that Section 8 renters are taking advantage of the system. He says they are hardworking clerks, shopkeepers, receptionists, and others who are part of the community fabric.
There are workers there that aren't paid enough to have affordable housing. They qualify for the Housing Choice Voucher program. They're good, hardworking people or people that have been in this community for many years that just need a little extra help with the rent.
So how does the Housing Authority find the money to generate the housing for more and more people for 50 years? The answer is creativity.
That's on all fronts. Some of it is about the financial side of it, so you have to make it work. You have to make the numbers work. You have to find the resources.
It uses federal programs, business and nonprofit partnerships, and for more than 2 decades, much of the money came from the city's redevelopment agency.
We were required to set aside 20% of our funds for affordable housing. And after we'd done some of the major projects downtown, Paseo Nuevo and parking, we went all the way up to 60% of that money going into housing. It became a major priority for the city, and partnership with the Housing Authority was one of the main sources of where we spent those funds.
Dave Davis says back in the 1980s and 90s, creating affordable housing was one of the city's top priorities. In 1989, this abandoned firehouse on Upper De La Vina became transitional housing for families to get back on their feet. Creative financing and a receptive community paved the way for what we have today.
The vision that they had in really looking at the city's housing needs and how we can provide for those, and going after the unique funding sources that we can capture to enable us to build the affordable housing.
So it's not surprising that this nationally recognized agency has a few new ideas up its sleeve for the next 50 years. The Housing Authority's most recent grand opening to date is the Gardens on Hope. Constructed on Hope Avenue, the complex will hold 89 units for frail senior citizens, complete with a full range of support services. This modern construction is a giant leap from the layouts of senior housing 4 decades ago. Built in 1976 at Ortega and Laguna Streets, Presidio Springs has 122 senior housing units. Now there are preliminary plans to start over and build 3-story apartments on this 1 square block piece of property.
We're looking at being able to potentially triple the number of units that are there, go to about 420 units that are on that site, and still have it, again, fit in with the character of the neighborhood and the community so that the entire community can be proud of what we're providing.
Another forward-looking idea in the works is to provide housing to the so-called missing middle. Many middle class earn too little to rent or own in Santa Barbara, but make too much to qualify for Housing Authority assistance.
2 bedrooms we're seeing go for $4,000, studios for $2,000. It's very difficult for even that missing middle to afford rents here and stay in our community.
He says we've already witnessed the negative impacts of losing the missing middle to other towns.
Creates traffic impacts for commuting. It drains the potential sales tax revenue from people that live in other communities but work here of doing their purchases outside of Santa Barbara. We want people to be able to afford to live where they work, and that's the whole point of our workforce housing development program.
Every year, the waiting list for affordable housing in Santa Barbara grows, which makes the Housing Authority even more relevant for the next 50 years.
California has woken up to the housing issues that we have in the community. It is a critical crisis, and I believe the state and local governments, the non-governmental agencies, and the communities at large are going to step up and make that next wave of housing happen. They can make it happen.